Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Not Yet Adults podcast. I, of course, am one of your hosts, Collin Geffrey, joined by the one and only times three, Eric Zayas.
Hey, it's your boy.
It's your boy.
Beep, beep, beep,
For those of you who don't know, the Not Yet Adults podcast is a bi-weekly, which is a confusing term because bi-weekly can mean either twice a week or once every 2 weeks, which doesn't make any sense.
Let's do a podcast where we talk about that. That's weird.
There should be the bi-weekly podcast and it just drops maybe once every 6 months. Who knows? Because bi-weekly apparently means nothing. But yeah, Not Yet Adults comes to you every Monday and Friday, and it is about myself and Eric's sort of journey towards adulthood as we sort of brave the storm and take it week by week, day by day. Eric, how's your week going, buddy? How are things?
Things are going well. I like the journey towards adulthood. That's a really nice way of putting it. I gotta memorize that so I can steal it. But yeah, and just like when working, I have a lot of days off coming up pretty soon, which is nice because I don't have to work. But it's also not super nice because then the paycheck is gonna illustrate that when that comes. But that's life.
One could say you're taking a vacation from work.
One could say that, I guess.
Speaking of segues, Eric, what did you want to talk about today?
Well, Colin, I'm glad that you asked because I thought that we talk about traveling and all the places we traveled over the years and all the vacations we've taken. Not all of them, but like the ones that are most interesting for a podcast episode. That's about half an hour.
Okay. Well, that sounds very similar to the format of this podcast, the Not Yet Adults. So I think that's probably a good call. You want me to start?
Yeah, let's start it off hot, Colin, with a story that you have of vacationing.
Well, thank you, Eric. Thanks for taking my call. It's great to be on the show. No, so I don't even know if you'd really call this vacation, but I guess it counts. I lived in Sacramento till I was 7. And I've been fairly vocal about this in this podcast. I've never really felt like I belonged in Spokane. And so about once a year since I moved here, sometimes more, sometimes less, I would go back to Sacramento and just kind of hang out there and see family and a couple old friends and just kind of get away from it all, so to speak.
Is Sacramento where you consider home?
It's real interesting, man. I think I feel more like myself there than I do in Spokane. That said, I don't really know where I call home. Home, I think we could do a whole episode on that. As just kind of this bizarre, abstract word that sort of means a lot of things, and we don't really know. I honestly don't think any one place feels like home to me, which maybe is some deeper psyche issue that we need to dive into at some point. I don't know. But yeah, I'd say I feel more like myself in Sacramento, which, maybe that means that's more like home to me. But yeah, about once a year, typically in the summer in like July or August, I would fly down and stay with family there. Often my grandfather, who's I'm probably closer with than just about anybody. And just kind of get away from it all. When I was with my grandpa, I'd go with him to the golf course a few times a week, and we'd go see movies. He lives in downtown Sacramento, so we can just walk to the theater. And there's always something happening downtown, so you'll just meet people or see a concert as you're walking by, or just fun stuff. Just this sort of stuff that you only get kind of living downtown somewhere. It just kind of has this energy to it I really like. And yeah, I just have a lot of memories of sleeping in his downtown condo, and there's always an ambulance or a fire truck going by outside the window, and so it's loud, but there's something to it. I love that energy of the city. I always have. And compared to Spokane, where the neighborhood my folks live in is somewhere between like the country and a suburb. It's sort of like a country suburb, I guess.
A cubburb.
A cubburb, if you will, yeah, or a suntry. But yeah, I just have always enjoyed getting back to Sacramento, getting to see family and faces you wouldn't usually see. And there's something very liberating. And I don't know if this is just me or if this is a common thing with people, but there's something liberating about going out and doing stuff and knowing you're not really going to run into anybody you know. And I don't know what that is with me, but like I love that feeling of just being somewhere that I can go get lost and like not have to worry about everything that comes with day-to-day life and living in a town for a long time. I really like that feeling, and obviously the further away you go, the more liberating that feeling gets.
Yeah, I think getting lost in like a big city is really nice because nowadays you can't really get lost with like GPS and like Uber and stuff like that. So it's fun to like get, I guess you'd call it like pseudo lost, where it's like you don't know where you're going, but you know that like, anytime you're like, okay, enough of this, and you want to go back to your hotel or go home, you can very easily do that. So there's like it's like kind of like bungee jumping. It's like free falling, but you know that you have like something to like catch you and like keep you from actually falling to your death. It's exciting but still safe.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I don't want to, show my hands, but a story I'm going to mention later is I did get lost overseas one time. And the complication there is international data of like how that works with phones. And so like we did not have phones and we had no idea where we were.
A little foreshadowing.
Little foreshadowing, yeah, just to kind of whet the appetite. So that's my very boring Sacramento story, Eric. I don't have anything particularly memorable that happened in Sacramento, but I get down there as much as I can, and it's always kind of a good reprieve from things. What about you? What's the first travel or vacation story that comes to mind for you?
Well, I have a lot of different humble brag, a lot of different like stories I go to, but like one that's relatively recent, so it's like best in my memory of the actual place itself, is Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada. I was gonna say British Colorado for a second. Vancouver, specifically, not Washington, but the Canada one. It was when I was 19, and it specifically, that age is important because not only was it very specifically my 19th birthday, but so it was like August 19th. I guess it must have been 2013, but because the drinking age in Canada is 19, so my dad really wanted my first beer to be with him, and I never drinking beer up till that day because like I'm not really the kind of person that parties much or like gets like drunk much, and like there was, when I was younger, I really had, I don't know, I guess there were certain things about me that I was like, I'm a person that likes to play by the rules in many ways. I hadn't drinking up until I was like, I think I was like 18, almost 19, and at this point I was like, I hadn't drinking alcohol at this point, so I was like, I'll just wait till I'm 21 because that's like the law, and also because like, I guess I thought it would be better or something, or it would be, I don't know, I just felt like I had this inclination to like wait till the appropriate time to. My dad really wanted me to have my first beer with him, and he's like, why wait till you're 21 when we can just drive to Canada and do it legally there when you're 19? So for my 19th birthday, we drove, I think it was 4 to 5 hours up north to the border, and I got my passport, and we went through U.S.-Canada border and drove another like 45 minutes to an hour to Vancouver. And then we went to spend like a weekend there. We got a hotel. We walked to this place in Vancouver called Gastown. And if any Vancouver locals listen to this, they probably know what that is. And it's just a place where there's a bunch of bars in the heart of the city. And we went to a nice like restaurant looking place, and I showed him my ID, and he's like, happy birthday, because he could tell that it was like I was 19 that day, and had my first beer. And like an idiot, I ordered an IPA for my first beer, which was a huge mistake because IPA is a very bitter beer, but I didn't know much about beer, and I heard about IPAs and heard about their delicious. And IPA is delicious if like you drink beer a lot and you're accustomed to that taste. So my dad just got a normal ale, because he knew that I was gonna like the IPA. And as soon as I took a sip, I was like, ugh. And he was nice enough to switch with me. And then I had like an IPA, and because he's a normal beer drinker, he drank his beer like pretty quickly. And by the time he finished his second beer, I was only halfway done with my first, because I'm a very slow drinker. Even now I'm a slow drinker. I've gotten a little better to it, but it's just like, I don't know, I want to like enjoy my drink. And it's also for me, beer's like a drink that takes time. But yeah, it was just a nice moment with my dad, and I don't spend a lot of time with my dad, which is something, it's not so much, it's hard to explain. I think it has to do with the cultural difference between us, because he was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and so he has this accent, but it's not even just the accent, it's just there's a difference personality wise because of the I think it's because of how we were brought up is different. You know what I mean? Like, in the place and the culture we brought up were different. And I think I've talked about this in previous episodes. So we're not as close as I'd like to be, but there's still like a warmth between us. Like, he's a a nice, a really good dad, and so like there's nothing like restricting us in that sense. But like it's nice for us when we do stuff together because it's like feel like there's not a lot between us that um connects us with cultures. So like recently we watched like the Rocky movies, and so we any excuse we have to like do something on a regular basis together is really nice. But yeah, so the Vancouver trip, it was a lot of my memories with traveling aren't so much the place, but like everything that has involved with going that place, and so that trip was really special because it was with my dad and because it was like I did a first thing in my life with him.
I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like your dad, not a dumb guy, probably knew that as you're getting older, going off to college, it's probably going to happen at some point, whether it's, at 21 or a little before. And obviously, I'm not condoning underage drinking. That's a very bad thing. Never do it. But I think it's cool that he was like, you're getting to a point when you're in your life where alcohol is going to be a thing. Let's kind of show you the ropes a little bit and just kind of have this bonding experience. Not where like you went crazy and like turned Vancouver upside down, but just where you could have this sort of entering the next chapter in your life with your dad. I think that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it was a really special moment in my life, and it's a memory that I hold dear.
Well, I don't have anything like that. I now my stories are going to seem like, oh, I don't have that really heartfelt emotional moment, but I really love that. So you wanna kick it to me? Is it my turn?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any other, because you talked about Sacramento, but I know you're from California. I was thinking there might be another place that you could like point to and be like, oh, I've been there as well.
Yeah, so I've been up and down California a
Heyo.
few times. Hey, oh, no big deal. San Francisco I love, but I don't really have any San Francisco stories. I've just gone and hung out there a few times. So the story I want to talk about is probably about 6 years ago now, and it was one of these times that I was down in Sacramento with my extended family. I was staying with grandparents, and what was different about this time is my brother and sister came along, which I love my brother and sister, but for years Sacramento had been like my escape of like just a couple weeks to get away from everything, and then it's like, oh, and by the way, your escape is your brother and sister are going with you. So it was me, my 11-year-old sister, and my 8-year-old brother, and our grandparents took us to Santa Cruz. Which, in case you don't know, anyone listening, Santa Cruz is this little sort of coastal town down in southern-ish California. It's not really southern; it's just like central. But anyways, a lot of people go there. It's got this nice boardwalk and all these games and rides and things like that. It's a very touristy thing, just a small little ocean town kind of. And yeah, it's sort of has this. I mean, it's not Hawaii, but it's kind of has a similar feel of just kind of come there and relax, and things are a little bit slower there. And so we go there to Santa Cruz, and I think I'd been to Santa Cruz as like a very, very young kid, but I didn't have any real memory of it. And what I find out is basically the entire boardwalk is the exact kind of rides that I don't want to do at all. Cause like I am the kind of person that doesn't like being motion sick. And so things where you're like going upside down at really fast speeds or roller coasters.
Not to interrupt, but I feel like most people don't want to be motion sick.
Well, you say that, and then all these people love going to theme parks and doing roller coasters and giant. I don't know what the heck amusement park rides are called.
Yeah, but those people who go on roller coasters, they go on there because they're excited and they don't get the motion sickness. I feel like if they got the motion sickness, they'd be like, oh, I don't like this.
You're making a good point. I thought they just pushed through it, but it is possible that some people don't get motion sick by that. I never thought about that. Yeah, so I mean, the story doesn't really have a beginning, middle, and end. I guess the thing that I remember is like just wanting to go kind of check out this town and just go into cool little shops and kind of walk around and see things. But our hotel was a stone's throw away from the boardwalk, literally like 50, maybe 100 feet. And we just got out and walked over to the boardwalk, and we spent like, I don't even know. I think like 2 or 3 days just at this amusement park. And I'm just like, I'm just very bored by the end of it. And very, nice of my grandparents to take me out. I hope I'm not coming across as spoiled or rude, but I couldn't help but to think the whole time that like I'd just rather be back at their house or back in Spokane or just anywhere else. I'm just very bored. I think it's too much of a good thing. And so yeah, that was that story. I remember I didn't get a phone till way late, and I was only about 14 here. So I had this $15 or $20 MP3 player I got off of BestBuy.com.
Oh yeah, Best Buy.
Oh yeah, man. And it had this tiny LED display, and I had these $15 Sony headphones. And they're like the white, they were white, but it's like the black ones you'll see on like film sets and stuff. They're just really cheap and lightweight that you can, get 100 of them or whatever. And I just, whenever I could, I would sneak away and just listen to music and walk by myself. And that was kind of the more fun moments of that trip. Is like I said, it's the same how I am in Sacramento. I like just kind of going and getting lost and seeing stuff, just kind of being in my own world. I really enjoy that about traveling. But yeah, so that's my Santa Cruz story. Again, I really appreciate my grandparents taking me down there, but it was one of those trips that I was just ready for it to be over. And I'll go ahead and kick it to you, Eric. What's the next vacation story you got?
As far as California is concerned, I have other stories like trips to Disneyland where my whole family would get sick, or trips to like one trip to San Francisco where I didn't really do anything but go on the tour bus the whole time. But another trip that I felt like would be interesting would be like when I went to Hawaii as a kid. I went there a couple times because my cousins, my dad's brother's family. So I have like my uncle and my aunt and my two cousins used to live in Spanaway, Washington, where I used to live as a kid. And so I'd visit them pretty regularly when I was like in preschool and kindergarten. And so I was like 4, 5, and 6. But around the time when I was 6, they moved because my uncles got a job that led him to Hawaii. And so his whole family followed him. And it was a really kind of sad moment because it was like this person I was really close to moved really far away. So every summer, every year, every couple of years, for like a week, like 2 weeks, I would fly to Hawaii to visit them. And the trips to Hawaii weren't like commercial flights. My dad is in the military, or was in the military, and so he would get these dirt cheap flights to and from Hawaii, where it wasn't like coach. It was like we were strapped to the walls. It was like in a cargo plane where we'd have this like, the seats were like these really cheap seats on the walls of the plane.
This honestly sounds like you like found someone like just north of the border, and you're like, we can smuggle you in our tiny cargo plane. We're just gonna get over. It's gonna be real fast. And it's like maybe legal, but you're not totally sure.
No, it's probably not too dissimilar to that. The plane didn't have the kind of insulation that commercial flights had, so you hear like it was really loud the whole time, and you hear like the wind as you fly by. So we'd have to wear earplugs, and because I was really young, and my dad was worried that the earplugs would fall out, or I'd mess with them and pull them out, which could like damage my hearing if they were out of my ears. So they had to tape the earbuds to my ears with what I remember was duct tape, but it could have been like masking tape or painter's tape or something. That a lot less intense, but to my like sensitive kid ears, like being 6 or 7, it might as well have been duct tape. And there was not a single window in the whole plane except for obviously the pilot's window, I'm assuming, but also this one window in the back, and the only door that let us in and out of the plane when we landed. And it was this tiny little window and so like occasionally I'd ask my dad if I could see out the window, and during the multi-hour flight, we'd get up and walk to it, and I wouldn't be able to see anything because this tiny window would be, in the air, so there'd just be clouds, whatever. So it's pointless. So I sat there, and it was really, that part of the experience was really bad. But when we landed, the local Hawaiians greeted us, and they give us I forgot the name of those flower necklaces you'd get, but
a lu or a luau or
yeah. No, it was a lei. It's called a lei. And so the adults get like just a regular lei, which is just flowers, and the kids get these leis that have these plastic flowers on them, and sewn in between the little plastic flowers were candies. So the like little strawberry candies or butterscotch. So you get like basically a candy necklace when you land, and I thought that was really cool. And I went there for a few years, and like the 3rd or 4th year I went there, they gave me just a regular like lei, like the adults gave, because I guess I was too young to get the candy version. So I was like, I don't want to go in here anymore. But anyways, the trip was fun. I don't really remember much of the Hawaii itself. I mean, there was also obviously the scenic like aspect to it, and like they had these like cliffs people would like jump off of, and they jump into the water, and it was really nice, beautiful water that they jump into. But like, I don't remember much of the trip itself. But it's weird the things you fixate on as a kid, like going there and coming back.
We should do an episode on that at some point of like, I don't want to speak for you, but for me, when I think about stuff from when I was a kid, it always has, or at least the things I remember, have this like very tactile, physical quality to them. And like that's what I remembered. Not so much like the feeling or what was happening, but just a very, very specific detail of like a physical object or something someone was wearing or something like that. That's always like what I really hone in on when I think back on stuff. But so one question I have for you, and I've never been to Hawaii, so this comes from a place of a little bit of naivete. But did you find there was a lot of things to do there, like a lot of activities, or was it mostly just lounging around and kind of relaxing?
It was a lot of lounging around and like driving. I remember there's a lot of driving and a lot of seeing the beauty of the land. But I, because we were so young, like if we did stuff, I don't remember it, or like I probably wasn't able to participate in a lot of this stuff because I was so young. I'd like to go back there as an adult for sure. What other places have you been, Colin? Because I know I talked about a little bit, like kind of, I wanted to talk about Hawaii sort of to get away, to create distance as far as possible from like in Washington. But like, what kind of place have you been to? What's the farthest place from Washington that you've been to that you can think of?
So this is literally just like I mean, it's a good story. This is like a stars aligned kind of moment in my life. About 5 years ago, I had this friend, and we hung out a lot. And her parents, her dad in particular, traveled like all the time for work. I think he was in software or something, and like every week he'd be flying somewhere, often out of the country. And so he had accumulated all the like an obscene number of frequent flyer miles. And like I'm gonna say fall or winter, my friend mentions to me, she's like, "Yo, my dad like he has all these frequent flyer miles, and in spring we're gonna go to London." And basically like you can come, well your airfare is covered because we're going to get free flights, and like just come hang out with us, like it's not really going to add any cost, the only thing is going to be like food. um and I was like, well, okay, haha, that's great. And I'd been like, my one of my grandfathers in particular, my mom's dad, was the kind of guy who was like always trying to organize trips and then they'd always fall through. And so I kind of had this chip on my shoulder, is not the right word, but kind of this expectation going into it of like, okay, this isn't going to happen, something's not going to work. And so a few months later, she's like, "Hey, you still up for going to London?" And I was like, "Oh, I kind of thought that was just like a throwaway comment." She's like, "No, we got our tickets. Like we're doing this." And so and I was like, "Crap. Okay, this is happening." And so her parents talked to my parents, and I still had a passport from a previous trip with my grandfather that ended up falling through. But I still had a valid passport. It was only valid for a few more months, but it was still valid. And they, through their frequent flyer miles, paid for my airfare, and I went with her and her parents to London.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that's crazy because like I had never left the country, I had never traveled. I mean, I'd been to Sacramento on my own, but then I was staying with family and stuff, and again, I love family, but there is this kind of weightlessness of traveling with, just a friend, or just people that you don't have that familial relationship with. It's just a different vibe. And so we go to London, and it was one of those things of like, I think we were there for maybe a week. But every single day we did something awesome. Like we did the really touristy stuff. Like literally, it didn't. This was on accident, but like the very first thing we did was we went to the London Apple Store because like one of them needed a charger or something. And so I got to see what the London Apple Store was like, and it was like 4 stories and all glass and freaking amazing. It was so cool. And then we went on the London Eye, me and my friend, and that was the big Ferris wheel kind of thing in London, but it's like enormous. Like when you think Ferris wheel, it's just probably 4 or 5 times the size. And so we went there, and then we went to like, we took, I think, a train a couple hours to the Museum of Programming, or I'm sorry, Computing, where like there was this computer called the Colossus that took up a whole room, and it was like used in World War II or something. And
Oh, was it like the Alan Turing?
kinda, yeah. I want to say it was in the 40s, but it took up the entire room, and I think it was used to calculate artillery or something. I know it's called the Colossus, so someone can look it up. I'm sure I'm misquoting it. But it was this whole museum of computing, and it showed all these different computers, and there was a mini museum of gaming there where they had like one of every console, and you got to see, kind of go through gaming and that. And yeah, it was just Every day was an adventure. We went to I don't remember the name of it, but it was the Library of London basically.
Oh, do you mean the London Library?
It was like the biggest library in London where there's like all this archives and data and stuff. And so my friend and I went there. Her parents were somewhere else. I don't remember where. And the thing I should preface this with is at the time, my friend and I were the two only teenagers in the world who didn't have cell phones. She had an iPod and I had freaking nothing. I had like an MP3 player. And so iPods obviously you need Wi-Fi, and finding Wi-Fi 5 or 6 years ago wasn't quite as easy as it is now. And we were overseas, so it's even more complicated. And so we go to this London library. We took I think like 2 trains to get there because we were staying in an apartment downtown, but it was still a few miles away. And we get out of the library and we're like, okay, that's great, that's awesome. And then I don't even remember how. I couldn't tell you logistically how this happened, but we were like, we don't know how to get home. Like we don't know where we are. And so it was one of those things of like, okay, we're just gonna have to take this on faith. And I think we just picked a street and walked down it till we saw something we recognized. And it took us like an hour, maybe more, but we eventually found our way back to the apartment. And that was such a in the moment, it's like, holy crap, holy crap, holy crap, we're lost in London. But looking back on it, that was such a liberating experience of just being with a friend and literally being lost in a totally unfamiliar place. And you could kind of just walk around, and it's very liberating, and you see things you wouldn't normally see, and you're a little more adventurous, and you do things you wouldn't normally do, and it was just a really really cool time. And yeah, I'll edit for time because I could talk about that forever. But yeah, it was a really cool experience, and I'm very thankful that I got to do that. It was literally just stars aligned. You knew the right people that gave you the right offer at the right time, and it all kind of came together. But yeah, I love that story so much. I'd love to go back to London at some point because there's just so much cool stuff, and you can't do London in a week because there's just a million things. But yeah. Anyways, I talked your ear off. I went way too long. But what's your story, Eric? What city in the big wide world do you have to talk about? That's I'm sure different from mine.
Interesting that you mentioned that because that is actually a place I've also been to. I went there during a study away trip at PLU, and it was the class was called Communications in Professional Settings, and the whole time I'm gonna be honest with you, we didn't really. I didn't learn anything the whole time there. Like there was one because we didn't really have any like structured class stuff. We just went on like basically touristy type stuff, and like there was one time where we met with someone who was a PLU alum who worked for. Oh my god, I can't remember. It was like it's like London's version of the Pentagon, pretty much. I think it's called the something house. I can't even remember. But we went to this place where basically we needed like security clearance to go through, and we were able to get security clearance because a person who worked there used to go to London, and she was like, our like hosting us there pretty much. But she like talked about like how like she like got a job there, and she gave us like advice on like how to. I mean, that was the only time where we learned like communication professional setting. She basically taught us about networking and how you like certain opportunities you need to go for, and like you need to understand that there's a certain risk with things, and it was a really cool experience. But like most of the time there, it was just like a vacation because we just went to shows, we went to pubs. Everyone there was 21, all the students there, so we just went like drinking a couple times, and it was awesome. And there's one time like during the second half of the 2 weeks there where they were just like, okay, there aren't any structured things anymore, so just like do stuff, but make sure. But as far as the assignments went there, every night we'd have to write a blog post, and that I guess was like the class part of it. But it was like basically talking about what we had done the whole day.
That's kind of like fun homework, though. I would kind of enjoy doing that.
It was interesting, and like so there's one day where I was like, I don't know what to do, so I just took, and like we had like these Oyster cards, which are basically like prepaid cards that work with all the different transportation systems, like all the like London transportation stuff. So like the London Underground, or what's called the Tube, it works with the Oyster card. The buses work with the Oyster card. The trains work with the Oyster card. And so as long as you had the underground map, like we get like these when you go to the London Underground, there are these like maps and it's all the transportation systems. So as long as you had that, it's color coded, it's pretty user friendly, and like also I had organized international data with my phone company before leaving. So there's one day where I just took a bus to a random place and just walked, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go to random places, and I'm gonna try to get lost, and I luckily didn't get lost, because if I had actually gotten lost, it would have been pretty bad. But there was one part where I was walking through these like streets in like what looked like a sketchy neighborhood, and I realized like, oh, maybe I should go home, because I basically I think I went to like the World War One museum, and I went there, was kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool, sort of got bored, left, uh, realized like the nearest like bus was a decent walking distance, so I went through this like London streets, and like it was just like neighborhoods, none of the tourist stuff, none of the city part. It was just like going to people's neighborhoods, and I was like, huh, this is like actual, like people live here. I'm just like walking as if like I live here. And then I got to a bus and got back to the hotel.
Well, and something a lot of people may not know is when you think of London, London proper, where like the touristy stuff is, I think it's like 1 square mile or 2 square miles, very small, like incredibly small, the actual proper city of London. And so, like you said, like going through kind of those back avenues and those neighborhoods and stuff, not hard to find something that. I don't really know how to phrase this, but it just feels more real, you know? It's like you go to the big landmarks and the touristy stuff, and that's great, but it all kind of feels like it's like here's the best and brightest we have to offer. But like you said, kind of just going and getting lost in, the random stuff, the weird stuff, just the parts of the city that are not front and center and made for tourists. I think there's something really special behind that.
Yeah, I wish I'd gone to places like you'd gone to, like the London Eye. I really wanted to go to, but it was too expensive because at least like, and there was no time really because of the first 2 weeks, or the first week was really structured, and the second week like, everyone was doing their own thing and no one really wanted to go, and I didn't want to go by myself. And the Museum of Computing or Computers sounded really interesting. I wish I'd known about that.
And that was like because my friend's dad, he was a software. I think he was an antivirus. I have no idea what he was in. Something in software. And so like I think it almost built the trip around that of like that's the one thing we're for sure doing. And so it was like maybe 2 hours by train or something away. It wasn't in London. It was somewhere else in the UK.
I definitely want to go back to London. I definitely want to try that. I also want to go on the Channel, which connects London to France. So like that's definitely on my bucket list.
We should do Not Yet Adults Goes to London sometime.
Oh my God, yes.
We both go back because that's what's so interesting to me. I know we're long in the tooth, but who cares? We're having fun. That's what's so interesting to me is like I have those touchstones and things I remember about London, but I'm sure there is far more that I've forgotten and like things I should remember about my trip that I just don't. So going back there and having sort of the introductory knowledge that will come back very quickly that we both have from being there already, and then being able to build on top of that and be like, oh, I remember this and I remember that. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I know the places I want to go back to immediately. Like shout out to Adventure Bar for all our London listeners, because I'm sure we have many. I want to go back there so bad. That's like of all the like pubs I went to, like the pub kind of places, they were kind of boring and quiet. But I went to a place called Adventure Bar. It's kind of sad that of all the places I went drinking there, the one place I want to go back to is a bar. But it was like, it wasn't even like filled. There was like almost no one in there, and it was so fun. The music was good. The bathrooms had like Where's Waldo wallpaper all over, or I guess they call it Where's Wally. But it was awesome. Something to like do while you're like drunk and peeing. But also the bathrooms also had like stand-up comedy playing, so it was like different. It was really cool. But yeah, I want to go back so bad.
Dude, we should. I know we're both like in the process of major life changes, and financial situations aren't what we'd like them to be, but we should plan like sometime in the next year or two, if we're still doing this, we try and go over there.
Yes,
for like a week together.
We gotta figure something out.
We like split a room or split an apartment or something and just kind of make it work. That'd be so much fun. Alrighty. Well, folks, I think that's a great place to end it. We apologize for going over, but if you've listened to 30 minutes, I'm sure 40 minutes isn't that big of a stretch. Let us know what your favorite travel story is. Have you been somewhere cool, or is there somewhere you'd really like to... God, that's what we didn't do, Eric. God, that was somewhere where we wanted to go.
Let's do it real quick, yes.
Real quick? Okay. Where in the world would you like to go if you could go anywhere in the world?
Italy. Not even a specific place, but Italy, probably Rome. I'd imagine like the food, it's great, and the like climate is great, and it's all beautiful, and I just want to go there so bad. What about you?
For me, it's Japan, and specifically Tokyo. Not because I feel like I'd be at home there or that I'd understand it that much, but the special thing, as I mentioned several times in the podcast, to me about traveling is sort of being in what feels like an alien world and just kind of getting lost and just going and having adventures. And I mean, Tokyo. I mean, where else in the world could you feel more alien or lost than Tokyo? At least from what I understand, I think that'd be a really cool experience. Well, folks, now that we've said where we would like to go in the world, let us know where in the world you would like to go to, or somewhere you've been that you really enjoyed. Hit us up in those comments or on the social medias. We would really appreciate it. And remember that this has been the Not Yet Adults podcast. It comes to you every Monday and Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and all sorts of podcast services. We are also on the social medias on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Not Yet Adults, as well as on our own subreddit r/Not Yet Adults, which you should check out if you have the time. If you have a little bit more time and you want to do us a solid, head on over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes if you're on iOS and leave us a rating and review there. It just takes a couple minutes out of your day, but it helps the podcast get seen and listened to by more people, which we appreciate because we put a lot of work into this, and we would really appreciate it if you could take the time out of your day to do that for us. We'll be back on Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time talking about something new, and we are very much looking forward to it. So thanks for listening. And until next time, this has been Not Yet Adults.
Bye bye.